So I tried to choose an example for the example in Foucault work. So let's take the panopticon, or the panoptism, as it is analyzed in the third part of Surveiller et Punir. What we have here is, first of all, a single historical phenomenon, the panopticon, that is to say, a peculiar architectonical model described by Jeremy Bentham in a book published in Dublin in 1791 under the title Panopticon, or the Inspection House, containing the idea of a new principle of construction, etc., etc. I suppose you are familiar with the Panopticon, which will become then a kind of archetype for prisons, institutions, enfermement, etc., etc. So Foucault describes the Panopticon, then after describing it, says, you have only to put a guard or a watchman in the central tower, and in each cell of a prison, and in each cell, a prisoner, a madman, or even a student, and you will produce a kind of theater where only one person can watch and control a multitude of men. So the Panopticon is a concrete, singular historical phenomenon, but for Foucault, at the same time, the Panopticon is, as he writes, panoptism. That is to say, I quote him again, a modèle généralisable de fonctionnement. A model of functioning which can be generalized. Or again, I quote, a principe d'ensemble, which allows to define and establish new sets in the relationship between power and the everyday life of man. So, from this point of view, the Panopticon is, I quote again, une figure des technologies politiques qu'on peut et qu'on doit détacher de tout usage spécifique. So it's no more simply a bâtiment onirique, a dreamlike building, but it is also, I quote again, le diagramme d'un mécanisme des pouvoirs dans sa forme idéale. The diagram of a mechanism of power in its ideal form. So, you will understand, it's very easy, that this means that the Panopticon functions as a paradigm in the proper sense of the word, as an example which defines the intelligibility of the set to which it belongs, and that at the same time it constitutes. And so this is the way, this is a good example. Foucault always works in this way. There is always a concrete phenomenon, le grand enfermement, the confession, the parousia, the juridical inquiry, etc., etc. So it's always an historical, concrete phenomenon, which will function as a paradigm, because it will decide of a whole problematic context, which it will both constitute and make intelligible. This is what probably distinguished Foucault works from the work of an historian. It has often been observed that Foucault, as an historian, has showed the superiority of the context created through metaphors on the context created by chronological or geographical caesuras, and that is to say, metonymical contexts. Following the path opened by such works as The King's Two Bodies, by Kantorowicz, Les Rois Thaumaturges, Marc Bloch, or Les Problèmes de l'incroyance, Lucien Febvre, Foucault has freed history from the tyranny of metonymical contexts. For example, what do you mean for that? Example, 18th century. France in 17th century, etc., to give back to metaphorical context their primacy. This is I'm convinced that the primacy of this kind of context is correct. You know that especially in field of humanities. If we take, for instance, especially in European Academy, when let's take, I don't know, an historian of English or French or German literature, disciplines who have no epistemological status. But so, as they know that there is no epistemological status, in order to have the appearance of some rigor or seriousness, they will specialize on for instance, on a chronological context. So they will specialize, for instance, in 18th century German literature. So on. This is really ridiculous, because the century is just a convention for measuring, which has no reality at all. It's very easy to if you think of it. And not only it has no reality at all, it's just a convention. Where does why the 18th century will form a Unitarian context? But also it is a very recent one, because the usage of the concept of century in this sense was discovered only by Flacius Illyricus, an historian of the church, which founded a school which was called the School of Centuriatores, because they were the first one to employ the paradigm of century in the modern sense. And then it was forgotten and rediscovered only after the French Revolution. So not only it's a convention, but a very modern one, no? Which didn't exist before. So just to say that the apparent seriousness of metonymical context, like the chronological, the geographical ones, have no epistemological basis at all. So let me now try to describe the logic of the paradigm, because usually scholars refer to Foucault methods as I quoted before, metaphorical context. It's not true. It's not metaphors he's employing. It's just paradigm. So let's now try to describe this logic, which is, so to speak, a forgotten chapter, or even better, a kind of a displaced concept in the history of Western philosophy. Moreover, the problem of paradigm is strictly linked to the problem of analogy, whose relation to logic has always been controversial. So the locus classicus for the epistemological problem of paradigm is Aristotle Analytica Priora, 1314. So philosophy very rarely refers to the problem of paradigm and to the problem of analogy. So Aristotle is perhaps the first one, but very shortly, very quickly. So Aristotle says here that the paradigm, the example, does not concern a part with respect to the whole, os meros pros olon, nor the whole with respect to the part, os olon pros meros. It concerns a part with respect to the part, os meros pros meros.